So, Covenantall is a business created to help to develop trust and respect in relationships. Um, I am your relationship coach, Chris Cook, and it'll be my pleasure to work with you and to engage with you in this process. GDPR responsibility, of course, we keep your information confidential. A founder and the director of Covenantall, and we have big dreams and goals with the concept, but we're focusing on the relationship fulfillment between spouses, husbands, and wives. But there are other aspects of the covenantal process that will be revealed in due course. But my passion is about creating successful relationships. The most important thing that I would like you to remember and bear in mind as we discuss the covenantal process is that we are applying innovative scientific research to build successful relationships, and more will be revealed. But that is the important thing. We know that the practices and suggestions we're making are scientifically backed, and therefore we know that they work. They just need to be applied. So I'm going to just outline some relationship challenges, talk about this idea of the explicit, dynamic, universal covenantal process and the origins of that. Talk about this relationship research that we're using, the information about that, and we'll hopefully get started. So, if I were to say, what challenges have you experienced or observed in relationships? What would you say? I imagine you'll say things like infidelity. That's a challenge. Trust issues. That's a big one. Lack of intimacy, low communication, conflict. That's also a big one. And financial issues. Sometimes there are issues that compound upon the individuals within a relationship and not necessarily the fault of either of them, but circumstances. Finance could be classified as one of those. Let me tell you about the sound relationship house theory. It is 50 plus, we've got 40 years here, but really it is 50 plus years of research summarized into one very pithy theory. Um, and it was created by John and Julie Gottman, who are also the founders of the Gottman Institute. I highly recommend you look into them and look into their research. They're actually quite an adorable couple. I'm going to talk about this sound house relationship theory and how it will be used to help you in your relationship as a part of this coaching program. The couple, the John Gottman was professor at Washington University, and he created what was called the Love Lab. And so it was basically an office in the University of Washington where it kind of turned it into a kind of a bed and breakfast kind of setting. And so it would allow couples to come in for a period of about 24 hours and then they will be observed. And the idea was to just observe them, what they were doing, and just make notes and see what can be learned. They had two-way mirrors, they had people strapped up to body reading mechanisms, uh, people's heart rate, sweat, and so on and so forth. They would even check people's urine to see levels of cortisol, the stress hormones in their urine. They had facial recognition, face reading technicians, two-way mirrors, as I've said, video cameras. It was definitely a research lab, but they tried to make it as comfortable as possible for the couples and participants. The couples knew each other very well, and also because of the rapport of the researchers, they were able to start behaving normally within about 45 minutes of entering into this research environment. And so the way they acted and behaved towards each other would be normal behavior, in spite of the fact that it is such a highly contrived environment. So the research was a very, very thorough, very, very robust research. They found that there were seven factors that made the successful couple successful, and they wanted to highlight these. The first one they said was that people were making love maps. They were building love maps. And this idea of building love maps is people would take the time to know more about each other. They would ask some deep, meaningful, open ended questions. about maybe some childhood experiences, what, a companion's hopes and dreams are for the future. Those open-ended questions allowed the couples to really, really gain a deeper understanding of each other. It is possible, and they learned that sometimes couples could be married for many years, and the way they were in their 20s when they got married, and the way they were in their 50s when, or their 40s, they had changed. And so they found it was important for couples to keep in touch and ask those open-ended questions and build those love maps, which is one thing we advocate here in Covenantall. This is one of the indicators of the successful relationships. The other thing they found was that people whose relationships were successful were doing what they call shared fondness and admiration. And that basically means they were just respecting and loving their companions. They would appreciate everything about their companions, and they would admire them, and they would love them. Making the effort to do that, they found, was one of the things that brought a lot of joy in the relationship of those who were successful. The other thing they found was that couples who were successful were turning towards each other instead of away from each other. They said that individuals within the relationship at times would seek to gain some connection from the other person, and that would be through trying to get some connection, trying to get their attention, some validation. And they would do this through, trying to get their attention by asking them to look at a certain thing or try to hold their hand or something. The idea of turning away from is to reject that bid for attention, is to not hold their hand, is to not get their attention, is not respond when they're asking for you to look at a certain thing. And they found that people who were on the receiving end of that were flustered and just were injured in some way. That was a negative experience. Those who were turning towards their companion, so if companion, and they mentioned this actually, one lady, she was looking out the window onto, I think it was the San Francisco Bay, do not quote me, and there was some yacht on the bay. And she said, "Darling, wouldn't it be nice if one day we could retire and jump on a yacht and go and sail the world?" And the companion, I think he was on the bed on his laptop or something. And he could have responded in three ways. He could have said, "Darling, what a crazy idea. When in the world are we ever going to afford to have a yacht and sail around the world?" That's turning away from. That's negative. He could have ignored her, which may not have been on purpose, just maybe he was busy, which also indicates sometimes when companions are on their phones and not giving their other companion the attention they need, that can fall into this category and be a negative thing. Or they can turn towards their companion, which is to say, darling, that sounds like a fabulous idea. Hopefully, I get that promotion, and one day we'll be able to afford to buy our own yacht and fulfill your dream. And so, this issue of turning towards and turning away from, they found was a significant matter. The fourth thing they found was the successful couples were building positive perspectives of their companions, and especially within a conflict scenario. It's possible to think that your companion is just, getting on your nerves or arguing with you because they're horrible or because their intentions are bad. The successful couples were assuming that their intentions were right and just taking that positive perspective and just really appreciating all aspects of their companion. This issue of conflict management they found was a really, really big issue. There were three main aspects of this conflict management. They said that companions would allow each other, the other one, to influence them. They found that males, the women also, but majority of males struggled with allowing their companions to influence them, take advice from their companions, and actually act on it and listen. They found that allowing your companion to influence you was a fact, an indicator of successful relationships. Quick question, and I'm going to allow you to think about this for a few seconds, but I will give you the answer. What of the successful couples? What percentage of conflicts that they encountered were, you would say, unresolvable conflicts? What percentage of the conflicts that they encountered together were unresolvable conflicts? An example of an unresolvable conflict would be if the man is from Nigeria and the woman is from Spain. They're both living in London now and they're talking about retirement. And he says, "I want to go back to Nigeria to retire." And she said, "No, I want to go back to Spain to retire." Of course, they can't retire in both places. And so that creates unresolvable conflict. And so, what percentage of unresolvable conflict would you say existed in the couples whose relationships were successful? The answer is 69. Nearly 70% of the conflict that were dealt with by the couples who were successful, the successful couples, were unresolvable conflicts. And so, if you can imagine, the researchers, they invited these couples to come back every 4 years. And so you'll see the same people, their hairstyle may be different, they might put on a little bit of weight, a little bit of beard, but every 4 years, they'll ask them about unresolvable conflict and they'll be dealing with the same issues. And so they found it wasn't the conflict, it was how it was dealt with, managed. Dialoguing about problems was an indicator of successful relationships. This idea of dialoguing, talking about the problems, and using soft startups. So, not launching into an argument, but starting in a respectful, soft way. I understand what you're saying about this issue, but my opinion is, and using soft startups. That was also an indicator. The next thing they noticed about the successful couples, they were practicing self-soothing, and self-soothing could take the form of one couple in the middle of this argument could say, "Look, darling, I am really getting a bit overwhelmed. Let's do this. Let me take 20 minutes. I'll go for a walk. I'll come back and we can talk about it some more then. I just need to fix my head. So I do respect you. I do love you. And I think it's an important conversation. I just need some time off." And so this idea of taking time off is a type of self-soothing and preventing the conflict from turning into a big issue, killing it before it becomes a big problem. That is, those three things are how the successful couples handled conflict. The next thing they found that successful couples were doing, they were making life dreams come true. And this means, first of all, knowing what your companion's life dreams are, and then doing what you can to make them be fulfilled. So if your wife, she used to be a ballerina many years ago, and she has a dream of setting up a ballerina school, you'll do what you can. You'll help save. You'll work some extra hours. You'll take the kids, and you'll do whatever you can to allow her to be able to fulfill those dreams. And on the conversely, if the wife wanted to assist her husband in his dream of becoming a radio DJ, she could do what she can to help him to fulfill those dreams. And so that's one of the things that they found successful couples were doing. The last of the seven things they were doing is creating shared meaning. And this idea of creating shared meaning could be the fact that the wife, she came from a family with their traditions, which were unique to that family and the fun things they like to do. And the husband, he's coming from a family with their shared traditions and fun things that they like to do as a family. But when they came together, this couple, they're creating their own meaning and their own traditions. This is one of the indicators of successful couples. They found also that there were two pillars of this house, this metaphorical house. The first one was trust, and the second one was commitment. And the definition of trust, I've seen many definitions of trust, and none are really wrong. Trust is a very big concept. And I would say one of the best ideas of trust is falling backward and allowing the person behind you to catch you. Just that assurance that you can be safe with this person. You know that this person will be there for you and this person's got your back. And that may feature in many different ways. But that knowledge is what I would like to suggest is the definition of trust. And then commitment is what you will need to do to make trust happen, and all the seven items on the previous page. Commitment is a very important part of this sound relationship house. They mentioned that there were four things that the failed relationships were experiencing, and they refer to them as the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The first one was criticism. They found that couples who criticize each other would not work out. This was an indicator of a failed relationship. The definition of criticism, or criticism, could be understood as complaining not so much about the issue at hand, because when you're in a marriage or in a relationship, there are going to be issues and you're going to find that there's a need to complain. But attacking the character of the other partner. And so finding the difference between complaining about the issue without attacking the character is the antidote to criticism. Let me give you an example. So husband and wife, they're upstairs in the bedroom or in the living room or wherever they are. They're chilling out. It's a Friday evening. They're watching a little bit of Netflix. The wife had cooked. It was a nice candle dinner and it was lovely. The meal was amazing. And she says, "Darling, I hope you will please do those dishes." And he says, "Sure, darling, I'll do those dishes. No worries. The meal was amazing and you cooked, so I'll do the dishes. No problem." Unfortunately, he fell asleep and he didn't actually end up doing those dishes. And so she wakes up in the morning, she's there going into the kitchen and she's looking into the sink and she's seeing all these dishes, these dirty dishes piled up from the night before. And she is upset. In criticizing, as he comes in behind her, she could say, "You slob, you said you were going to do the dishes. You didn't do them. You are such a liar." So, using words like "you always" and "you never," she's attacking the character of her spouse or companion. And that is criticism. What she could have done is to say, "Darling, you said you were going to do the dishes and they're still here. I hope they won't be here for much longer." And so she's focusing on the dishes and she's not attacking the character of her spouse. They found that the second our horseman of the apocalypse was defensiveness. And defensiveness can often follow criticism, where the spouse could say, the husband could say, "Well, darling, I was tired yesterday. I was working all day and there's a lot of stress at work. And sure, I fell asleep, but give me a break. I was tired." And so instead of defending himself, what he could have done and what the successful couples were doing, they were taking responsibility. They were saying, or he could have replied by saying, "Do you know, you're right. I did promise I was going to do those dishes. But, sweetheart, don't worry. In 10 minutes, I'll get those dishes done and you won't have to see those dishes again. I'm so sorry." And so he's taking responsibility and he's resolving the issue. And that's the antidote to defensiveness. The third was contempt. And they found that contempt was the highest predictor of failed relationships. And contempt is one or maybe both people in the relationship believing some way, somehow in their heart and mind that they are better than the other person, that they're smarter, that they're more attractive, that they married down and they're more worthy than their companion. This attitude causes them to disrespect, to humiliate, to condescend, and just treat their companions very horribly. They found in the research that people on the receiving end of being paired up or married or in partnerships with contemptuous spouses or partners, they experienced a deroding. Is that the word deroding? Diminishing of their immune system. Their immune system would diminish somehow because of the stress that they would encounter because of being with a contemptuous person. The antidote, and by the way, this the evidence was found that within the next 6 to 12 months of that encounter or those experiences, the person on the receiving end would be more susceptible to communicable diseases, and so there's a great deal of negativity. They found that the antidote to contempt is appreciation, humbly appreciating your spouse or your companion or your partner, being grateful for them and thinking yourself to be very lucky to have them is what the successful couples were doing. Celebrate your spouse. Run outside and say, "Look at me. I'm so lucky. I'm married to the best wife or best husband in the world." And this will allow you to have a sense of humility, gratitude, and you will not be contemptuous. The fourth horseman of the apocalypse was stonewalling. And stonewalling could manifest itself in the middle of a conflict where the wife, and again, men, I'm so sorry, but usually the men are the more likely one to be a stonewaller in a relationship, especially in a conflict situation. They found that the wife could be, yelling or complaining about something, and then the man would just shut down. He would not look at her. He would just, shut down and not give her anything, no body language, anything. But underneath, his heart rate is going crazy. The mechanism was reading that he was definitely experiencing some stress. After this exercise, the researchers would go up to the man and say, "What was happening at this point in the conversation and the exercise? What was going on?" And he would say, "Look, I just didn't feel like I could speak to her anymore, and I just shut down. I just didn't want to get involved in this conversation anymore." Unfortunately, the woman, instead of using the 9 millimeter on him, she's pulling out the cannon because she's trying to get his attention. And so, stonewalling they found to be a very bad, very good predictor of failed relationship and a bad practice in conflict management. And so, what is the antidote then to stonewalling? The antidote is to take some time off, to call for time out, to say, I need to self soothe, and we can deal with this matter after I've recovered a bit. And so that allows you to move on and not find yourself stuck in that conflict situation. Let me talk then about the covenantal process, what it is, and how it will be used to help you in this coaching program. It is a step-by-step tool for establishing trust-based relationships. Okay, so trust, we found this is a research in the work environment, but these findings can be transferred to the home environment, the relationship, the romantic relationship environment. And so, in high trust environment, people were experiencing all these positive outcomes in comparison to those who were in a low trust environment. And so we know that there is evidence for a high trust environment. Let me tell you about my master's degree research. In my dissertation, which is titled Exploring Sense Making of Psychological Contract Breach, I interviewed 15 participants in a qualitative interview, and the interview lasted between 30 minutes to 60 minutes. And I asked them about 15 questions. And these questions were focused on this concept of the psychological contract and psychological contract breach and what their experiences with both have been. We highlighted a particular experience and we just focused on and asked some questions regarding that experience. Now, let me talk to you about the psychological contract. A psychological contract, and the best way to explain a psychological contract, the psychological contract is um, opposite to the employment contract, which is a document. It's quite explicit. It's quite written out. It's got your title. It's got the amount of pay that you have, your work, hours of work, annual leave, etc. It's quite explicit and quite tangible and written out. The psychological contract is not so. The psychological contract is the contract in the mind, and it is made up of the expectations that people have of their employers and the organization. When these expectations are not fulfilled, a psychological contract breach has occurred. And so the idea that was the two questions of my dissertation was first, how do people perceive and experience and interpret experiences of psychological contract breach? That was the first question. The second question of my research dissertation is, what do people suggest would have prevented the psychological contract breach from occurring in the first place? We want a preventative solution. I've been taking all the responses from the participants and coded them, transcribed them, the the audio into text, and then coded the text and looked for themes in the codes. I came up with the response to question two as, take the psychological contracts from the metaverse of the mind and bring them somehow into the real world through an explicit, dynamic, and universal process. And so this is the origins of the EDU covenantal process, the explicit, dynamic, universal process. And we will go further into that. But before we do, I want to highlight the underlying ideology of covenantal. And it is this idea of Hesed. Hesed is a Hebrew word. There's no immediate equivalent in the English language, but it signifies high sentiments of empathy and compassion. Empathy and compassion. This idea of a hesed is an empathy and compassion has to be the the foundation on which the covenantal process is undertaken. Otherwise, it will not succeed. Surely we entered into our relationship because we fell in love with the person. We decided this is the person that I want to be with, and we at that point experienced all this love, all this compassion towards them, and somehow that may diminish over the years, especially when conflict into the relationship. We want to go back and highlight this idea of empathy and compassion. And so bear that in mind. That's going to be a fundamental principle that will underlie, underpin this covenantal process. Let me talk then about what the covenantal process is. It's a seven-step process, starting with the initiation, which is the first step. The second step is the investigation. The third step is the sit down. The fourth step is the negotiation. Fifth step is closing the deal. The sixth step is the promise. And the seventh step, which is the final step, is the sealing. And I will just go through and explain these a little bit more. So, the initiation starts when two people have a relationship interest. If you're already married, then you've had a relationship interest for as long as you've been married. If you've just met and you're dating, you've got a relationship interest because you see the potential of having a successful relationship with each other, and therefore you have passed the initiation phase. Step two is the investigation. And the investigation consists of deciding what your expectations are of this person and what your offerings are to this person. So you're looking at all your expectations that can be made of your relationship with this person, and you're documenting them and you're making them quite explicit, and you're exploring them and investigating them, and also equally what you can offer, what you can do to this person, what you assume their expectations are, and how you can fulfill them. That's the investigation step. The next step is the sit down. And the sit down is a meeting where you come together with the documented expectations and offerings that you've investigated in step two. And you start by making a list of covenants, a list of agreements, which we will be referring to as covenants from here on out, that will form the basis of your new successful relationship. There could be a list of 10, there could be a list of 20, we don't know. That will, um, you know, be formulated as you go through the process. It could be a list of three, but it is up to you to decide what you can do to bless your companion and what they can do to bless you, and then make some covenants out of that. Step four is the negotiation. The sit down is the first tier on a three-tier refinement of the covenants that you're going to be making. And the second tier is step four of the covenantal process, which is the negotiation. And the negotiation is where you go through the list of covenants that you're making and what your offerings and expectations of each other's are. And so you're putting together covenants that are mutually beneficial, and that's the negotiation phase. This idea of negotiation isn't what you would think about in the context of the business world, where the parties of the negotiation would want to get as much as they can from the other person and give them as little as possible. That is not the concept that we're talking about. The negotiation in this concept, in this setting, is about figuring out how the covenant can be drafted up in such a way that is mutually beneficial to both parties. The next step is closing the deal. And this is the third and final step on the covenants refinement process. And so you're still looking at these covenants and you're still looking at how you can improve them and make them as mutually beneficial as possible. And then comes step six, the promise. And this is a very important part of the process. This is where you will be saying to your companion that I understand what your expectations are of me, and I know you understand what my expectations are of you, and they're very documented, and they're very much, explicit and clear, and we are promising to each other that we're going to keep them. The promise is perhaps, if not the one of the most significant and powerful aspect of the covenantal process, and it will require the commitment and the determination and the hard work potentially of both parties to keep those covenants and make sure that the trust is strong. Item seven, which is the last one on the seven steps of the covenantal process, is the sealing. And the sealing consists of signing the document. So it is drafted up, the list of covenants are there, and both sign it to indicate that they are happy with their covenants and they will keep it at all costs. That's the seven steps of the covenantal process. Now, let me tell you how we plan to use the covenantal process as a delivery mechanism for all that research that we found in the sound relationship house theory. First, this idea of creating and building love maps. The covenantal process facilitates that. Sitting down with each other, creating that level of understanding, um, allowing you to create shared fondness and admiration. The covenantal process facilitates that, allowing you to understand the importance of turning towards and responding positively to those bids for connection. Covenantal process facilitates that. Maintaining a positive mental attitude towards your companion, especially in a conflict scenario, assuming that they mean the best and don't accuse them or assume that they mean the worst. The covenantal process facilitates that. Um, and to be honest, this is my favorite. The covenantal process allows couples to preemptively and collaboratively resolve conflicts. I remember listening to a podcast from a divorce lawyer. He was talking about the prenuptial agreement, and he said, like, you usually prenuptial agreements, they've got a bit of a negative uh, kind of reputation in the field, because usually there's an older man who's rich and he's married a beautiful young woman and he wants to protect his finances, and so he gets her to promise that she's not going to get to understand that she's not going to agree that she's not going to get any money should they divorce, um, which which is, in my opinion, a very negative thing. What this divorce lawyer was suggesting is that they could use these prenuptial agreement to do to deal with positive aspects of the relationship, such as this idea of conflict management. And so they're saying, darling, we just got married. I'm totally in love with you. You're totally gorgeous and you're so sweet and you're so amazing. And you're in love with me and we're in a great place right now. But it may be that in a year or two, we might have a conflict. We might have some argument and some unresolvable conflict. In the event of such an occurrence, how will we manage that conflict situation? What are we going to do? What's our strengths and in terms of resolving the conflict, and how will we actually apply those strengths to resolving and managing the conflict? Having those discussions, writing down exactly what you're going to do, is a very powerful aspect of preemptively and collaboratively managing conflict. The covenantal process facilitates this. It allows this kind of preemptive and collaborative conflict management to occur. And this is one of the strengths, the great strengths of the covenantal process. I hope that you will take full advantage of it. The next step is to make each other's life dreams come true. The covenantal process allows you to find out what those life dreams are and to make plans to bring them into force. Create shared meaning and that unique culture that is idiosyncratic of your relationship. The covenantal process facilitates that. Build trust and commitment. The covenant process facilitates that. Now, let me talk quickly about the implementation process. So, step one is going to be done as you are invited to complete a 10-minute survey, which is to gauge the level of trust and satisfaction and happiness in your relationship at this moment, at the beginning, the pre covenantal intervention. And then Step two, which is in week one, is going to be the investigation process. And the investigation process is going to consist of filling out a form with all the expectations and all the potential offerings that you can make of each other. And you'll do that individually. You'll do it over the course of the week, because I don't think it's something that you can rush. It needs to be done over the week. And then you will be able to um, come together the next week, week two, and have what is understood as the sit down, where you will each bring your list of investigation, and you will sit down and you'll start to create some covenants with each other. And this will happen throughout the week of week two. Week three is going to be focusing on the negotiation, and this, as we've said, is the second tier of the three-tier refinement of those covenants, and you'll be focusing on that throughout the week, the whole of week three, um, and there'll be some other activities as well. Week four is going to be focusing on the final stage of uh, refinement, covenants refinement, and you'll also be doing some other activities as well, and those will be explained in due course. Week six is going to be step six is going to be focused on it's going to happen during week five, excuse me, and that will be the promise. Step six is the promise, and that involves the commitment that you will keep the covenant that you're making, and there will be some other activities. Week seven, sorry, week step seven, week six is going to be focused on the sealing of the covenants that you've made, and so you'll be saying to each other, you will sign in this document to signify your satisfaction with what you've decided to do and your commitment to keep it. Week seven is going to be focused on shared vision, which is this idea of shared meaning, and this will be the shared dreams and goals and meaning. This will be the focus of the week. And then week eight is the last week, and this is where we kind of have this conclusion and review. Um, there is another opportunity to complete that same survey that you did at the beginning of the covenantal process. You'll be asked to do that again, and hopefully we would like to suggest that there would have been a great, tremendous amount of improvement in all the levels that this survey was focusing on. Our vision is to become a leading proponent of healthy, trust based relationships, and we invite you to participate in making that dream come true. So, having gone through the covenant process, um, we would appreciate some positive reviews on social media and also on the internet. Um, Now, we would like to ask if there are any questions, any concerns, any items of discussion. You will please raise those with me, and I'll be meeting with you every Friday at 7:30 p.m. And we will go through the coming events of the week, and talk about issues of the previous week. And you can give and have a chance to feedback. I'm also creating a community where there will be an opportunity to be with couples who are experiencing the same covenantal process. And it will be an opportunity to share some ideas and thoughts and feelings and expressions. It's a safe space where trust and confidentiality is highly valued. And hopefully, it will be an enjoyable experience also. So, that is the breakdown of the covenantal process. And I look forward to going through with it with you.